Good morning, Ed with Bloomfield Cemetery. Making a video today just talking about random things about town. So, every now and then I just start thinking about what could I do to make a video, put some more items out. And, I got to thinking about some of the little things around town that perhaps are no longer there. And, for instance, I was thinking about the school. When Dale and I were about ready to start school, they closed the Bloomfield school down the previous year. So unfortunately, we weren't able to attend Bloomfield school as students. However, for a couple of years after the closure of the school, there would be events held in the school building itself. So, so we got to go to parties, town get-togethers that would happen there, and the school ground also had a basketball court. It was a shortened basketball court compared to regulation size. It did have blacktop, and it had a basketball hoop at each end, but everything was wooden. The posts were wooden, the backboard was wooden, uh, and it had the hoop there. I don't recall it having any nets ever, but so we would often go up there and just play basketball or just shoot around, even though we were pretty small, and the hoop seemed way up there. But we also would utilize the blacktop area to, at the time, um, there was a model plane company called Cox, and they had these airplanes where they had a fuel engine on them, but the control rods were all string controlled. So we would stand on the center court and fly the model airplanes with the real engines in them around in a circle. I couldn't even imagine doing that today, but when we were kids, it wasn't that big a deal to sit there and go around in circles and circles and circles. But every now and then, the string would get extended a little too far, and we would crash into one of the uprights for the basketball hoop. So, and believe it would just explode. The plane would just explode. But yeah, that was fond memories of being able to go up there to the school, and do stuff up there. The old trees that are still uh, around there, there used to be more of them, and it created nice shade. So on warm summer days, we would be up there and just sit, and it was a very pleasant area for growing up. All of Bloomfield was. There was plenty to keep young kids entertained. Um, the ball field had a wooden backstop. The cyclone fence backstop that's there currently, that was installed pretty much the same time as the cyclone fence up at the cemetery in the late 60s. When the community club, founded in 67, got up to speed, and they started um, doing improving things around town. Um, so I do remember the wooden backstop. It was a kind of makeshift wooden backstop. It had all different size boards, colored boards, so it was probably salvaged from something, around town, a building that was taken down. Um, but we didn't care. We would just go down there and hack away. Often we could get Dale's mom to actually go down and pitch to us. So, you know, um, we were so young and small, we had to have, short bats in order to try to hit. And Dale's brother Johnny was bigger, a few years older, and he had a larger bat, but it's like we couldn't even swing it because just, a couple ounces or pounds made a difference. We also used the field to launch uh, model rockets. Yeah, later, well, that must have been in like the 70s. Um, Dale had them, and I think back now, what a fire hazard that must have been. But we just didn't think about such things. The 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 ball field was also used. Once the park started having barbecues, the Emma Herbert Park have barbecues. They needed auxiliary parking because the field wasn't used for parking like it is today. Excuse me, the ballpark field. All right, the Emma Herbert Park field wasn't part of the park at first. So, in order to accommodate all the cars that would come to the barbecue, they utilized the baseball field to park cars. And there was a footbridge that led from the field across the ditch to uh, to the Bloomfield Road. The ditch, it seemed much deeper at the time than it is now. Therefore, that's why it had to have a footbridge. And at the entryway to the ball field, at some point, they sank metal posts with a whole lot of concrete, trying to drape a chain across the entryway in hopes of keeping vehicles out of the ball field. So, as many of you know, in the late '60s, uh, hot rods, these high school boys, which will remain nameless, um, love to drive into the ball field and do donuts on the infield. And there was a handful of older kids who would do that. And so anyway, they tried to prevent some of that by putting up these posts. I don't know if they got a deal on steel pipe, 4-inch steel pipe set in concrete, because they utilized some up at the cemetery, also at the entryway to the cemetery, which are still up there. But the ones to the ball field, at some point, I don't know, they just realized that people are going to drive around them, which they could easily do. Uh, so they removed the poles and the huge concrete cluster. One of them, which is still there, we mow around it all the time. It's behind the backstop. So, that let's see, ball field, or so then go across the Bloomfield Road to Emma Herbert Park. And when that park was originally opened, it had no water source. It didn't have a well. So they tapped into the Mason well. The well for the Masons is in the outer part of the parking lot. It does have metal posts around it. It's close to the stop sign at the corner. And then it has the pressure tank inside of the building there at the Masons. They piped water from the pressure tank out the back of the Mason Lodge, across the street, across College, through the backside of Stormy's, and across the canal to the kitchen set up at the Emma Herbert Park. And in order to get the water pipeline across the canal, they constructed a cable bridge, posts on both sides, and then suspended cable from up high down, supporting a box that they created that went all the way across, a wooden box that went all the way across the canal with the pipe inside of it. So that wooden box made for a really nice walkway for us kids, which we weren't supposed to. We shouldn't have been doing it, but it was strong enough to hold us. And I don't know how they didn't think kids weren't going to do what we were doing, but anyway, that evidence of that pipeline is still there. It doesn't cross the canal anymore, but the pipe feeding it is still there in the embankment there. College Street still has the patch in the road where the trench came across. It's like all the evidence is still there. That yeah, many fond memories of us um, do a tight walk across tightrope walk across that box. And of course, Malcolm Pierce. Malcolm Pierce was, I referred to him kind of like this grandfatherly fella who was around town. You know, he loved Bloomfield so much. Born and raised there, he would be kind of in the center of everything, all events and stuff like that. So he would spend all his free time down tending to this brand new park and nurturing it, you know, doing his best to take care of it. So there were many times where we would be down there uh, playing on the things we're supposed to play on, and playing on the things we probably weren't supposed to be playing on. Climbing some of the trees. There was a willow tree there that, in our early teens, was big enough to climb up in. It was kind of in the middle of the park, but then, like most willow trees do, they just kind of kill themselves off by getting too big. So um, those are all pleasant memories. There used to be a play structure when the park first opened. There was a play structure that also had tires, truck tires, big tires that people could jump from tire to tire. You know, it was cheap fun, and probably liability insurance and different things came into play. You know, just like up at the cemetery with the water tower and the trees and such. So so those are kind of some memories of mine downtown. And then of course Stormies. You know, we would go down to Stormies for a soda candy bar. As the bell tower was being built, um, that was really fascinating and interesting. I mean, just stuff happening around town was really of great interest for us as kids. And then once the bell tower was completed, you know, we could just go down there and sit. It was kind of like a gathering point. Unfortunately, some people did um, carvings on the table, which are still there. There's one big one for Led Zeppelin, um, whatever musical group they were attracted to, and of course the bell up there had a rope, and who isn't going to ring the bell at some stupid hour of the day or night, right? So there was a box. They routed the rope for the bell tower to come down and then come through a small flute area into a locked box that was in the ceiling. I don't know how many years that locked box lasted, but not too long, and it hasn't been around in quite some time because people would go up into the attic area, the ceiling area of the bell tower, and treat it like a fort. I think there's probably still some carpet up there. Let's see. So anyway, bell tower. The My cat is still. She loves this room that I do the recording in. So um, let's see. The Masonic Lodge across the street. Um, there was a railing system put in. It's kind of like a handrail, kind of like a stop, so people wouldn't walk off of the edge of the concrete in the front. And it had a single bar going across it that Dale and I would just go down there and hang out, and we would do somersaults over this single rail. And at some point in time, they put an additional rail across the middle of it, which we then could no longer do these somersaults on. So, and about that same time, after they took down where the Mason parking lot was, of course, there was Hazel Lynn had her the old skating rink, which was then her brooder house, a glorified chicken coop of sorts for her poultry business. She donated that to the Mason Lodge. They took it down and built a brand new paved parking lot on that whole section there. And It was beautiful. I mean, even for a kid, it was beautiful. It was black. They had stops, raised stops, little big these berms they built for when people would park in there. And so that when the newness kind of started wearing off of that, there was another place for these teenage boys, high schoolers with their big block Dodge Chargers, no names, but to get into the parking lot there at the Mason Lodge and do donuts and do young men stuff in that parking lot. So we were just observers. We were kids. We were on Schwinn bicycles that we had to pretty much build from scratch because the dump, Sonoma County dump, had recycle areas for different things. One of them was bicycles. And at that time, a person could go salvage bicycle stuff. I don't recall if they charged, and if they did charge, it was very minimal money. So we could build not only bicycles, but whatever. We could build go-karts off of recycled parts salvaged from the dump. And at some point, they stopped doing that, which is kind of sad because it was a way for young boys to be creative. And we were extremely creative with, Bloomfield with the hills there. We just wanted stuff with wheels. We didn't really care what it was. We just wanted to roll down hills. So that's another thing. Across the way from the Mason parking lot, the Oddfellows building, that had at some point in time they put a concrete porch on that. There again, it didn't have steps up to it, so it was pretty high, probably about a foot high off the ground, and we needed a place to jump our bikes. So we put ramps, leaned them up onto that concrete, and that worked really good until one day I missed the ramp and went went over my handlebars and crashed and broke my front tooth. Um, that piece of tooth is probably still down there somewhere. Anyway, I thought I could hide it from my mother. Like if I didn't smile ever again, she would never know. But that night, yeah. So so that's a crown right there from from jumping at the front of the Oddfellows / fire hall. So when we got bicycles built and go-karts built and whatever, we went everywhere around town, which I'm really grateful that we did because there was a lot of houses that our fellow students lived in, which gave us the benefit of exploring that property. And I'm grateful for that. We got to go through a lot of barns, a lot of old buildings. Um, and, I reflect back now that, a lot of those places are no longer around, which, so I'm just grateful that we had the opportunity to do that. Riding bicycles, go up to the end of Cockrell. On the north end of Cockrell, the road turned into a grass lane up past Zimmerman's place. It used to be open. The road used to be open. It would, so the pavement end right out front of Zimmerman's. The road continued up north by another block or so, and then it would take a right heading east down to Bloomfield Road. So at some point that got closed off. As did, let's see, Cockrell at the other end was a through road that continued on past College all the way down to Petaluma Valley Ford Road. And um, let's see, also Lincoln was a through road that would head south all the way down to Petaluma Valley Ford Road. And then they sold off part of Merchant Street, which which I wrote about. But then it was donated back to the town uh, from Lewis Johnson. So, there have been various, and then of course Broderick Street that used to go through to Main Street, got closed off, and now it just rounds up to Church at the intersection. So, um, a few streets, and another block behind Zimmerman's at the time. It was before Zimmerman got there. So, some of those roads, Mill Street, there's a fence up where the cannabis guy put a fence in at the end of Mill. Um, there was an old house on the north side of Mill from Hazel Lloyd. She owned that had a huge plum tree out in the front, and we would always raid that plum tree. It was a two-story house, a Victorian, that William Lake and his wife lived in the 1800s, and Hazel Lloyd had her time when she enjoyed buying a lot of property in town or possessing a lot of property in town. So this house, which was handed down through the family, um, like I said, had a big plum tree out front. We would hit that plum tree whenever we could, but we always had to watch out for Hazel because it was our impression that she was mean, just mean. Uh, it's funny how kids can get an impression of an older person that may not be true at all. And see, I know we got yelled at least a couple times from her about something about trespassing and maybe stealing, but I mean, plums, come on, Around Bluefield, there was always plenty of fruit. Obviously, blackberries, still plenty of those. There were always these apple orchards everywhere. There's still a few of those, and plum trees did very well there. Uh, so anyway, going up Cemetery Hill, uh, the Cemetery Hill. Obviously, it's a steep hill. Going up Going up Pleasant / Sutton is very steep. Going up Broderick is a little easier. Um, I did hear a story from Stan Pellegard about somebody who had their wagon, it's either a wagon or a hearse, motorized hearse that had a problem where something fell out the back of it. Didn't get any details other than that, trying to listen to this story. It's, wow, okay. The family must have been horrified if they were there, but for a while, the county chose to have traffic to Valley Ford running through the cemetery, headed up Pleasant, through the cemetery, and then down the fence line to John Mills' place. It was because of a dispute with the road that we all now know that goes around that hill. For a while, they wanted to reroute and go through the cemetery. Fortunately, that didn't last but a year or two. Then there was an article about Abe Kaiser, who was transporting lumber, and how his lumber deliveries were reduced to like a third because his team couldn't get up that hill because of the weight. So he had to greatly reduce his delivery sizes, and that's in the late 1800s. So fortunately, it was worked out through a court case and road supervisors and whatever it took for sanity to come back. But they eventually paid Mr. White for access to his property and the work he did on the road. And it was a dispute over money. So the entryway to the cemetery had a gate, a large gate, plus an overhead structure up top that said Bloomfield Cemetery on it. It was an archway, but without an arch, it was more like straight. And that entryway, is right on the edge of my memory. I remember there being one, and then it just went away. So uh, I looked and looked and looked for photos, and then one day over at the Tamales History Center, I found a copy that had a photo of that archway. So I was just like so happy to see that finally, and it was also with a photo of the original Lefebvre's Hotel, the Big Valley house. Um, a couple of fantastic photos. Thank you to Tamales History Center for those. So yeah, I took pictures of them and then utilized those images. So that that entryway to the cemetery, is what I remember. And then talking to Stanley Pellegard about what was there previous, and he would describe it as fence boards that were just kind of like loosely put together. There's some examples of that still in town on Cockrell, heading north on Cockrell, where it's just like split wood that they either nailed to cross members or used wire to attach it. But he said it was just kind of like a loose series of boards that went along what's now is Hillview, that represented the fence to the cemetery. And he said down at the south end there was a step ladder like A-frame where you walk up one side across and then down. And I bet at one point in time it was probably open, um, just so people didn't have to deal with a fence. But then the realization that livestock would get in there and started knocking stuff over, because it doesn't take much effort for a cow or sheep to push up against one of those tall, slender headstones and just snap it at the base, knock it over. So a fence was a good thing. And then let's see, in the 30s, there was a large. They needed to have a water source at the cemetery. So they invested in, well, they had like a raffle and potluck and the things that Bloomfield used to do to raise money, to build a water tower on the top of the hill, a new water tower. Don't know if there was an old water tower there, but they needed a new water tower. And they also put an electric pump at the waterworks. The waterworks were on the northeast side of the intersection of Sutton and Cockrell, called the Waterworks. I didn't know about the Waterworks until Bob Mattery. We were talking one day about the Waterworks, and I was like, What are you talking about?" So he told me about it. Now I always had known that there's a pipeline running on the south side of Sutton in the ditch, and I believe some of it's still there, especially when you start going up the hill, just past Lincoln, heading up to the cemetery. That was the last place I saw the pipe. So that pipe would pump water up to the water tower, and then it would gravity feed to a couple spigots that were in the cemetery. They're still there. And of course, the water tower went away in the 70s. Bob Mattery built a home in the late 60s. Bob Mattery built that home that sits right by the entryway to the cemetery. And at that point in time, the water tower went away because of liability issues. I understand that. Kids, crazy kids climbing on stuff. It's only a matter of time before somebody fell in it, and they probably wouldn't find them for a while. Uh, so Bob Mattery sank a well on his new home property, and with that, they could make the water tank obsolete. And then they plumbed a couple faucets to come off of his property well. Uh, those worked great for a while. They haven't worked in quite some time. I don't know if it was disconnected or what, but the spigots are still in place. They're still there. Um, okay, and the entryway arch, So like I said, that went away, and didn't know what happened to it or why. And then I was talking with a, a guy whose family has a couple plots there at the cemetery. When he was 14, 15, before he got licensed, well, his family liked to put pea gravel on one of their family sites close to the front gate. And they were doing so. They had a small dump truck up there. His dad asked him to relocate it so they can get a different angle. And he said he was backing up and he clipped one of the uprights. And he said he broke it. And at that point, the sign was down and became obsolete. So it was, I remember feeling great joy at knowing the story, while sad that the archway was a casualty. I was really happy to know what happened to it. So, so that's what happened to the archway. The footings for the archway are still in place. Uh, those were put in place just before the Great Depression started. My recollection is in 1929. The footings are dated. Both footings have dates inscribed in there. Probably somebody wrote it with a nail or something. And it's my hope that those can stay there and then perhaps get another archway installed. Um, that would be really nice to see that back up there. The sign was installed. The Bloomfield Cemetery sign, just to the north of the old archway, was put in. That has since been changed out because it rotted after 50 years. You know, it was it was time for that to be redone. Um, and having a heck of a time with the letters on that, because it's hard to find pre-cut letters, 6-inch pre-cut letters. They're all like processed fiber wood, and no matter how much paint or epoxy I put on them, moisture gets in there and it swells the fiber, and then it peels the paint, and etc. So that hasn't gone too well. I mean, it looks great starting out, but after a bit, not so good. Hillview Road. My dad used to be a CB enthusiast. A lot of folks were in the late '60s. So fortunately, my uncle lived out in Inverness, and my dad and him were always trying to like communicate. They could easily pick up the phone and call each other, but they wanted to do it in their CB radios. They wanted to talk on their CB radios. So he would take us up to the Cemetery Hill. We'd go up Broderick, and at the end of Broderick, top of the hill, it was a turnaround area, because the road, even though it went through, it was dirt road from Broderick to the top of Hillview. So the road that ran in front of the cemetery, it was grass and dirt. And so I just remember going up there and sitting, and while my dad was doing his CB radio thing. And so that was that there again. We didn't take our bicycle. I don't recall taking our bicycles into the cemetery ever. If we took them up there, we would leave them outside the gate. We would walk in the cemetery, and at the time there was trees surrounding the perimeter, very large trees, which a lot of them also would be cut down because of the liability issues and stuff like that. But it made the cemetery very dark, and um, there wasn't a lot of grass, probably any grass, because my recollection is they used to the caretakers used a lot of weed killer and such at the time. So and they installed a lot of rock, probably from the quarry up Bloomfield Road. So it just seemed unfriendly. Like now, when I look at the cemetery, I think of it like a park. It's inviting. It looks grand. It looks so nice. But back when we were kids, it was very dark. Um, not not comforting at all. But for some reason, enjoyed being there for whatever our reasons were as kids. And then somebody would hear something, see something, and then we would go sprinting out of there in the fear of, something. Uh, Adrenaline gets going, and I guess there doesn't need to be a reason at that point. It's just like just got to run faster than the slowest kid there. So those are still pleasant memories because it was part of our childhood. And then at some point, a lock on the gate, or the fence got changed out as part of a fence building campaign by Babe Earnshaw. I have the paperwork on that shows contributions for it. She was really, really good about civic pride. And I mean, a lot of people in Bloomfield were so good about civic pride, about doing their part, trying to make the town better. And I didn't know Babe Earnshaw, I mean, she was an elderly woman at the time. I would see her driving around. She would come up to see Solvay. So she would drive her car up there, and she would be around town. We just knew that was Babe Earnshaw. If only, if only I was mature enough, and what kid is, to say, hey, can I talk to you about history or share photos or whatever? But we the photos that she had were handed down through the family, and I had hoped at one point that with the help of Jimmy Tremere, I was going to get to talk to Babe's son who lived over in Hawaii, but um, I guess he either had him and then didn't have him, or and then he passed away, and now all of that goodness is gone, at least for now. Who knows? Maybe it'll show up somehow, some way. But anyway, the fence at the cemetery in 1967, 1968, the new cyclone fence went in, and including a gate, cyclone gate. And then in the 70s, with vandalism and such, they needed to stop having people drive in and cause vandalism. So the gate got locked, and it's been locked since. Fortunately, um, kids have different interests these days rather than driving their cars and causing vandalism. So um, we generally don't have any cars going into the cemetery unless it's a service vehicle or an occasional burial. If someone's handicapped, they need to see something, for a legit reason. But the cemetery was designed for horses and carriages. It's not meant to endure vehicles being around. We did have one lady who backed up into one of our crepe myrtle trees, and fortunately it survived. But trees are expensive. So well, anyway, I mean, this is almost a 40-minute video, but I want to get little tidbit history out there, the spoken word, rather than stuff I know, stuff I think about. Just keep putting it out there, and hope people enjoy it. If they ever have any questions about certain things, some of those answers will be in my videos. So I guess that's it for now. I'll probably think of more stuff, but anyway, hope you're all having a great day. It's raining here, and that's okay with me because it's a nice change. All right, but it does make the grass in Bloomfield grow quicker. And once the floodwaters recede on the park down at the ball field, I can get back in there and get that mowed again. So anyway, hope y'all having a great day, great weekend, and I'll have more later on. All right.